out to Socrates. Socrates still trying to get the opening. Oh, Socrates! Whoa!
And there it is. The crazy gang have beaten the Culture Club.
Maggie Thatcher, can you hear me? Maggie Thatcher, your boys took a hell of a beating. Your boys took a hell of a beating.
Welcome to You Have to Say That's Magnificent. It's the World Cup themed little brother of Your Boys Took a Hell of a Beating. And we are talking Scotland once more as we head into the 2026 World Cup, where Scotland have emerged from 28 years of darkness back into the light that will be USA 2026. Say no more on that. But we're going to focus very specifically on one particular fixture that Scotland have got this summer, and it is, in fact, one of the most frequently repeated group stage fixtures in World Cup history. Meetings 4 times across World Cups past, Scotland and Brazil, usually 8 years apart, 74, 82, 90 and 98. I don't know what went wrong in 2006 to have kept that spell going. Perhaps people need to listen to the past episode that we have done on Scotland's travails through that time. But this is a fixture that has echoes of fabulous tournaments past, great teams, great prospects, and dashed hopes as well. A career-defining experience for some when they get to face Brazil, a nightmare for others, let's face it. But we have, along for the ride, in the Scottish corner, we have Lewis Ness back once again to delve into the dark past of Scottish World Cup history. Hi there, Lewis.
Hi, Aidan. How you doing? It's great to be back on the podcast and great to be back at the World Cup as well. So it's a win-win, this one.
Unlike these fixtures with Brazil, it has to be said, which was not a win-win for Scotland. But we'll get to that.
They weren't. There's one that's quite good. We didn't lose every single one of the games we're going to talk about, which, as a Scotland fan, you basically chalk up as a win at this point. So,
absolutely, we will get onto that one very, very soon. And also with us is Stephen Scragg, with plenty of recollections of World Cups past when we delve into some of these. Hi there, Stephen.
Oh, looking forward to this, Aidan. I mean, Brazil, Scotland. It's just such a vivid time. Really, it's a vivid fixture. Obviously, don't remember 74. I was a month or two old. But then, 82. Remember it like it was yesterday. 1990 as well, and 94 and 98. Sorry. It's the vividness of it, which is the great thing for me. The blue of Scotland up against the bright yellow of Brazil, and the noise that is provoked in the stand. I mean, we're not going to get this in 2026. We're going to kind of walk away from the 2026 version thinking all those corporate tickets that went, and the small pockets of Brazilian and Scotland fans in there. But
they'll probably not allow Brazil to wear their blue shorts as well. This is a thing that will spoil the image of it, because Scotland, I think, is all dark blue nowadays. Therefore, I think that won't be allowed.
Yeah, there will be a few aesthetic kind of. I mean, it's taking place in Miami though, so that in itself is pretty cool. So looking forward to the 2026 version on the back of what I've seen in the past. It's just it feels right that Scotland are going to go up against Brazil, and when Lewis said there, these 4 games of the past that we're going to look into, that one that they didn't lose in a way is actually the dullest of the 4.
Possibly the most frustrating as well.
Yeah, the most frustrating, but also the dullest. I mean, I think all 4 games give you something, but I think that's the one that gives the least in a way, because when we'll come through it all, but there's so much more character to the other 3 games than there is to the first one.
Well, let's get straight onto that first one there. So 1974, Lewis. A long time before you had any awareness of such matters. But Scotland came into the 1974 World Cup. It's quite a strong side under Willie Ormond at the time. I guess it's a squad combining the older stars of the 60s. So you've got Denis Law and Jimmy Johnston both making the squad rather past their prime. But you've got the emerging talents of Kenny Dalglish, Danny McGrain, Gordon McQueen, Joe Jordan, as well as other elite players of the day, Sandy Jardine, in Scotland. You've got Peter Lorimer and Billy Bremner, the captain from Leeds, of course. So it's a very strong squad, but one that came into this match with Brazil having only beaten Zaire 2-0 in their opening game. Complacency, lack of killer instinct. When they run into the group's weakest team in their opening match, be warned about that in this summer's showpiece, Lewis. But this is Brazil, Lewis, who are reigning World Cup champions. This was not the Jogo Bonito of 1970, though. Long gone. A few names were the same, Jairzinho, Rivellino, I suppose, but a lot had changed. But 0-0, as you say. So yes, this is the one that Scotland didn't lose, but oh my goodness, they had the chance to win it. Billy Bremner could have sealed an incredible place in Scottish football folklore had he just been able to nudge a ball over the line.
It's so frustrating. It's so agonisingly close. I mean, that's one of the fun things in preparing for this podcast. And I think I agree with Stephen. Having gone back and watched all the games before this, it probably is the dullest one for the neutral, but it's kind of one of the most heart-wrenching for a Scotland fan. My favourite one to watch is coming up fairly soon. I think everyone probably agrees with that. Even as a Scotland fan, 82 is just kind of irresistible, that Brazil team. But looking at 74 at the moment, it's one of those, that Scotland team, you mentioned it there, it's such a good side. You've got obviously the players of the moment, Billy Bremner are there. You've got icons sort of from days gone by, but still in the squad. You've Jimmy Johnson, Dennis Law, and then a young Kenny Dalglish and Graham Souness. I mean, kind of, I sort of looked through all the other Scotland teams that had gone to World Cups just out of curiosity, and I think there is an argument to say this is the best side. It's certainly one of them. I think you could put, just on paper, nothing else, you could put 78 there. We're not going to talk about how that tournament actually went and everything else in amongst it, but on paper, that was a good team as well on 78. But this was a good Scotland team on paper. And I mean, how quintessentially Scotland can you get? You're undefeated, you draw with the champions, only concede a single goal in the group, and you don't go through because of being able to put two past Zaire. Yeah, let's hope that isn't what happens at the World Cup very soon. But we were a bit naive in that opening game, as you say, take the foot off the gas, and it's just one of these moments. If you don't do that, or Billy Bremner does score, Scotland have been at a World Cup since I've been through to the knockouts, which is still something that eludes us. I think you could probably say, looking back over the years, this was our best chance to date, I think, with such a good team, albeit the format of the World Cup was tougher at this time. I think it is a bit of a missed opportunity, which feels bizarre to be saying, playing against Brazil, but Scotland were a very different outfit at that time as to what we are now.
And I think it's almost a forgotten strong tournament from Scotland. They went home undefeated. There's obviously a lot more to the Zaire story than simply complacency on Scotland's behalf, as much as that definitely, I think, was the case in that opener. The fact Yugoslavia got 9 against them had a lot of other factors to it from the Zairean side. So, yeah, there is more to it. But Scotland, they were good, they were strong, they were unbeaten, and were unlucky, I suppose, at the end of the day, Stephen, to actually be going home. The circumstances, the order of the fixtures probably did for them as much as anything else.
Yeah, I think that it is the deciding factor. I think that Scotland, ended up playing Zaire first, because Zaire are never going to be more enthused with what lies ahead than they are in that first game. So whoever plays Zaire first will get the bumpier ride against Zaire, because you've got the other two who kind of percentage play between the two of them, and there's a bit of shadow boxing. It's like, whatever you do, don't lose. And if Scotland had been playing Yugoslavia or Brazil in that opening game, then I think Scotland probably get a draw out of that opening game. And maybe it's them that can run a few more goals past Zaire in the second set of games or the third set of games. I do think in that 74 World Cup, that's what it came down to. So, for me, I think, there is frustration there. But I mean, I think in terms of like the game between Scotland and Brazil being the dullest, when I say that, I mean, I don't mean that from a Scotland point of view. There's the Billy Bremner opportunity, and there's Scotland end that game very, very strongly. I sat today and I was reading the match articles, so I watched the footage as a reminder, and reading the match articles. Actually, I picked the Guardian because I thought they go more in depth with a broadsheet, and the reporter, a fellow called Paul Wilcox, does the report in the Guardian for that 74 game. and he cites Brazil having a bright start, and there's rattles the Scotland crossbar within 15 minutes, and but once Scotland ride that initial wave of Brazilian kind of endeavour, Brazil just kind of like just taking pot shots from distance, and Scotland finished the game much stronger than Brazil do. So yeah, it's a huge. It's the biggest missed opportunity that Scotland have in these 4 games. But I think that it's just such an anti-Brazilian side. It's just not the Brazil that we always want to see in a World Cup.
Even the kit didn't look right, did it? It just looked a bit too basic and not bright and exotic enough.
No,
and that was reflected in the team.
It was reflected in the team, and it's the complexity of Zagallo as well. To be almost the accidental winning coach in 1970, but the brand of football that was played. And then there you've got this protectionism football. And I get why they did it in 74 because of 66 and the brutality that they experienced on the pitches of Europe. So I get why they're looking at it and thinking, European World Cup, let's get our punches in first. That's kind of the approach that Brazil have, and it does take them to within 90 minutes of reaching the final again. Thank God Brazil didn't reach the 1974 World Cup final, but at the same time, I do think that Brazil just does not glow in 74, and we would look at that game a lot differently if Bremner pokes the ball the other side of the post to what he does.
However, if anyone was going to miss and screw it up, Billy Bremner being that man is fine by me. Some of the comments he made to the Zairian players on the pitch is anything to go by. He was a rather unpleasant man. But there we go. It was a missed opportunity. I think overall, the 74 tournament for Scotland gets a little bit lost or overshadowed, shall we say, by some of the more calamitous tournaments that follow, whereas really it should be remembered as a successful tournament that just didn't quite go the way when push came to shove at the end. But, they did well. But let's step forward 8 years. And, the Brazil of 1982 was rather different to the one of 1974, Lewis, wasn't it? All aesthetic beauty, a much nicer bright kit as well. But we've got the players really to showcase here. Zico, Socrates, Falcao, Aidan. Serginho up front was a bit more cumbersome, but he was the only one. It was an excellent team playing stunning football. They'd come through their opener against the Soviet Union with a couple of spectacular goals. It hadn't been plain sailing throughout. Whereas Scotland, again, a strong squad. Not as strong, probably, I would say, as the 78 team that imploded, but still a very, very good team. We've got Alan Hansen, Willie Miller, McLeish, McGrain, Dalglish, Archibald, Souness is in there now, Strachan, and even John Robertson from Forest as well. Some really good players here, Lewis. And Scotland, they'd had the weak opponent in the first game as well. New Zealand, those 2 goals they concede might come back to haunt them. Who knows? But again, we're coming into it off the back of a win. An interesting game, shall we say, for how this one went.
Definitely the most interesting one, I would say, of the 4. And to be honest, and this is not being very patriotic of me, but going in the build-up when I knew we were doing this podcast and getting to re-watch the games back, this was the one I was most looking forward to, because as a fan of football, how can you not want to watch that Brazil 82 team? I mean, we all know Stu Horsfield wrote a whole book on it, and it's a brilliant book, well worth a read. And since basically I read that when he released it many years ago, and decided to watch an absolute abundance of them, including them very much humbling us. And it's amazing football. It's what it's all about, and it just showed they were a different class in terms of the caliber of player. You mentioned some of them there. It is interesting from a Scotland perspective, though, because you do have the side itself. I went and found out that Scotland team that you mentioned in the squad. You've got 10 European Cup winners' medals between them from the previous 5 years. 3 UEFA Cup winners, 4 European Super Cup winners' medals within another 2 seasons. They would then get a further 2 European Cups between them, 2 more UEFA Cups, 4 Cup Winners' Cups, and 5 more Super Cups, as well as a collective 63 domestic honours. So they weren't too bad themselves, managed by a little-known Scottish manager, Jock Stein, who I'm sure he would have done something in Europe at some point. So it's pretty star-studded Scotland, especially kind of looking at where we would fall later on. we did a podcast all about that as well. But the actual quality of that game is just, it was amazing to watch. I mean, that's what you want from your Brazil. You don't want the sort of 1974 outfit. You want your Joga Bonito, all flair Brazil, which with the incredible goals. I mean, 3 of the 4 would be in a compilation for best goal at the World Cup if they happened this summer. The Zico free kick to equalise, Adair's chip to make it 3-1, and Falcao's final goal. They would be on a goal of the tournament compilation just in themselves. Although David Narey doesn't do too bad himself either to put us in the lead.
Not too bad at all.
No, it's just an amazing game. It's one of the great World Cup games, I think. What a joy to watch. So I definitely wasn't complaining going back and watching that one, even as a Scotland fan.
Yeah, if you're going to get outclassed by a team like this, let's face it. And having had your moment in the match, I mean, David Narey, it was jokingly derided as a toe poke. It was an excellent finish into the top corner. There is another book on this topic called We Made Them Angry, and that was the theme of what that goal did to Brazil, Stephen, wasn't it? It provoked a response, shall we say?
It did provoke a response. Yeah, that game is just one of my favourites of all time. As Lewis says, there's something magnificent about Scotland's part in this as well. You can be, I don't know, there can be a glow of kind of glory almost in a team that is the straight man to a team like Brazil in that game. A year earlier, not even a year earlier, the previous December. Liverpool had a very similar experience in Tokyo against Flamengo in the Intercontinental Cup game. And it was just kind of like, I remember sitting watching that game as well and just being blown away by how good the opposition was. And I still have warm feelings about that game, despite a 3-0 drubbing at the hands of Junior and Zico as part of that team as well. And I just think, when a team glows and plays a beautiful brand of football, there really is no shame in being the team on the receiving end, and this is what Scotland were in this game in '82. And Jockstein was pragmatic enough to know that as well. He does pull some of his punches. He leaves Dalglish on the bench, he leaves McGrain on the bench. There's no Brazil the player, rather than because Alan Brazil would have been playing in the game. Alan Evans, European.
That would have been too confusing for the.
That would have been confusing. Maybe that's why he did it. Scotland are without 4 players that really would start that game. Jockstein's already looking at the Soviet Union game as being the crunch one, and that's why he's kind of left certain players out, because he's clearly looked at this performance, and certainly the way that they clinched the game against the Soviet Union was like, let's not go toe to toe with these. Let's have a pop, but let's not be stupid. And David Narey, what a wonderful goal that is. I can remember sat there watching it going, thinking, oh my God, what a great goal that is, and then literally, oh my God, what have you done? Was what kind of like flashed across your mind, and you can see that in Narey's celebration. The way that the arms go up and the celebration, and then suddenly he kind of like brings them down a little bit, and it's like, yes, but and it's and then what Scotland do, and to be fair as well, when Zico scores that equaliser, that free kick, it's a contentious free kick. There's a lot of kind of like arguing that should never have been a free kick, but once it's given and the way he puts it in, it's a magnificent free kick. And say Aidan's chip, Falcao's finish. Lewis mentioned them all, and I don't have to go to YouTube to look at them. I can see them in my mind's eye. They are just some of my favourite footballing moments, full stop, let alone the World Cup. That's not because Scotland are on the end of it. That's, I think Scotland play their part in that game. They go toe-to-toe with that Brazil for 45 minutes. And yes, they're overwhelmed in the second half. But when Scotland go in at 1-1 at half-time in that game, they do so deservedly. There's a lot of credit for Scotland in this game that goes alongside the brilliance of Brazil.
Yep, absolutely so. And let's cut the long story short. It didn't go so well in the final game with the Soviet Union and Scotland missed out. But yeah, it's taken part in an iconic match against a very, very iconic team in Brazil 1982. So yeah, more than played their part when it came to the story of that particular World Cup. But 8 years on, and we are at another tournament. We're at Italia 90 now. Having had the despair and disappointment of Uruguay in 1986 and all of that, we now come to Scotland in a group with Costa Rica, Sweden, and Brazil. Well, in that order, which I guess has echoes of what we're facing in 2026, Lewis, in terms of the order of difficulty of the games as you perceive them anyway beforehand. Doesn't always pan out that way, but as you perceive them beforehand, it was the opening game and the disaster against Costa Rica. For all efforts on the Costa Rican goal, it would not get past that goalkeeper on that day. But I think, again, there was elements of complacency. Then an excellent win over Sweden, which, rekindles hope just when it seemed it was all gone. And we now have the decisive game, Lewis, against Brazil. This isn't a Scotland team anything like as strong as that we've been talking about from 1982, I don't think, in terms of quality of player. All those awards and honours that you talked about there from big teams and matches across Europe as well as domestically. We don't have as much of that by this point, of course, but equally it's a far more pragmatic Brazil. It's not Brazil 1982. It's not Jogo Bonito. It is a little more tight and tense, and that's how this game played out. Scotland basically need a draw to see them through as one of the third place teams, if nothing else, because Costa Rica did beat Sweden on that final game. So a draw would have taken Scotland through as a third place team. And it was looking good for much of this match, wasn't it? They were holding their own. They were having their moments. Mo Johnston, I think in particular, went quite close once or twice, but it wouldn't happen. And then, well, what do you know?
Well, it's very Scotland, isn't it? It's an interesting one. Obviously, looking at the four games as a collective, we were talking about 1974 not being the most vintage. And maybe this is biased because Scotland got a draw in that one and ended up losing this one when a draw would have mattered. But I think this might have been my least favourite of the four games, just because, again, it's not the most vintage Brazil. It's a big drop in quality in that Scotland team. There's still some very good players in amongst there, but it's certainly not of the previous two ilks we were talking about. And I mean, part of what makes this fixture so iconic is Brazil, of course. But it isn't a vintage necessarily. But Scotland were in pretty good stead, irrespective of that, with how it had gone. I think Jim Leighton had played well. He had to make a few pretty important saves. However, could he do better for the goal? Maybe. Probably should be pushing it wide instead of back into the path. It almost gets blocked, but it is a very scrappy goal, and it's a pretty disappointing way to go out. You did mention Mo Johnston. He really has to be scoring up the other end. He has a really, really good chance, and it's very much a what if, a Scotland what if, that one. I think two different moments there. But just kind of reading the sort of things that were being said about the game after the fact, I wanted to go see what Andy Roxburgh had to say about the tournament, he was talking about it, I think it was to the BBC a few years ago, and it said that after the Costa Rica game, which was the disaster of the tournament, that he was laughing for the rest of the tournament because he'd saw a big sign that said, "Don't worry, Andy, your P45 is in the post." So I'm going to assume that there wasn't very much optimism going into this game regardless. That slightly had been kind of redeemed by that late kind of win against Sweden. Obviously, they all looked like they could have almost equalised, but they didn't. Set it up possibly. Ends up being one of those what ifs between Leighton's save or lack thereof and Mo Johnston up the other end. So it's another Scotland what if on a very, very long tail. If you did every Scotland what if, you'd never stop the podcast, I don't think. But this is an interesting one. Certainly not one of the more vintage that we'll say, but yeah, a bit of an opportunity missed to get a result against Brazil in this one, I think.
Yeah, absolutely so. And it does fit the overall Scottish narrative of screwing up where they should win, giving themselves a real opportunity, and then falling just short against a team where you give them less hope of achieving it. It's just making it extra hard for yourself. It's the pattern, and this 1990 fits it perfectly. I think it was Koreka's shot that Leighton failed to hold, and Muller was the one who tucked it in at the back post into a worryingly narrow net that they had in 1990. It's not right, is it? But anyway, that's how it went in. Interesting side issue on this one, Stephen. Modem O'Cloud gone down in folklore for, well, in some rumor mills saying he got killed. He didn't get killed. He got hit square in the face from a Branco free kick and was not cold for some time. He has no memory of the match apparently, and yet rumors apparently spread that he'd been hit so hard that he got killed because he disappeared from the scene. That was ludicrous, of course, but a nice little side issue.
It was very similar to a David O'Leary one at Anfield early in that 89-90 season. Ray Houghton caught this volley and it hit O'Leary on the side of the head, knocked him clean out, and he just had that slight delay as his kind of like his brain and his body kind of like tried to calculate what had just happened, and then he just fell like a tree. He just went bang, and over he went, and that Murdo McLeod one, it's on both of those occasions you were just like, it was that wince that you're thinking, God, don't envy being on the end of that at all. But yeah, that Scotland game, Lewis is right. It's not a vintage Brazilian side by any means of the imagination, that one, even though there's some very good players in it. This was I can remember this being the first time Brazil being termed as having gone Europeanised in their approach to a World Cup. This would be repeatedly said many times over beyond Telly Santana, but this was the first time, 1990, and it was infinitely Brazil being less Brazil than we would like them to be. We've spoken about what happened in '74, so clearly stuff like that had happened before. But in my football watching existence, this was the first time I'd seen a Brazil that was, less than exciting, shall we say. The expectation on them is always huge. But yeah, and Scotland worked so hard for 81 minutes in that game to keep Brazil contained. And, that Brazil just seemed happy enough to be contained as well. And like I say, this speculative, Koreka shot and, Leighton, who'd done so well, as Lewis said, he'd had the trauma of being dropped for the FA Cup final replay. Yeah, he'd had a decent World Cup and he'd made a couple of really good saves early in this game. But yeah, it's just such an unorthodox. You watch that goal back, and I don't think I'd seen any goalkeeper do that before with what he in the direction that he pushed the ball, and whether it was just with the way he was landing or whatever it was, his thought process, maybe the way he dropped, he couldn't have pushed the ball out to his side. But yeah, as soon as you saw that ball spoon in the direction it did, you were just kind of like, no two ways about it. This is going in the back of the net one way or another.
And to add to the frustration, Brazil didn't even need to win. They'd have won the group even with a draw.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Another tale of woe and frustration as Scotland just miss out at the last. And then, yes, one more encounter from Scotland's past, 1998 on this occasion. It was the opening game of the tournament in France as the reigning champions, Brazil, were up against Scotland in the opening game. The world champions and favourites to win it again, I guess I should say. We now got Ronaldo, the real Ronaldo, in his prime, in his pomp, still as a young lad, but very much about to dominate, or so we thought. Well, he dominated one way or another this whole World Cup. But again, Brazil were not great in this opening game. Scotland actually performed really well. And again, this is a Scotland squad that is not featuring the same star names. We touched on this briefly in the other podcast before we delved into the years of hurt that followed of the squad that Scotland had at this point under Craig Brown. Standout players, I guess, John Collins, who does score in this game with a very neatly, calmly put away penalty. There was not some of the star names that we've seen in some of these past squads, Lewis. It was a much more, well, maybe it was a more cohesive unit, perhaps. I don't know, but it was a decent performance, a decent team. but ultimately one that the game got away from them again. They'd fallen behind early on. Collins equalised again, but we have to have a moment of calamity, don't we, Lewis? It has to, just like Leighton in 1990 and that goal, it seemed that we had to have a moment that would just give you something to linger on and think, oh, goodness me, if only that hadn't happened.
We had to. It's such a horrible, calamitous own goal, which doesn't really feel like anyone's fault, but it's just horrible to concede in that way. And I mean, it's not so late on that you can't kind of react back from it, but you go opening game, you go down to Brazil 1-0 very, very early on. You do well to get a penalty back. Last goal that Scotland scored for well, it's certainly the one that when we had the promo every time for the 28 years that I was growing up, and they would do, can Scotland qualify for the tournament this time? And they do the wee compilations on the BBC or anything else. You would always see that John Collins penalty. It's stuck in my head. I didn't even need to watch this back to remember that Collins penalty, because you just see it all the time, basically, in compilations. But we do very well then to hold on after a disappointing start to the game, and then that's just how Scotland can you get, really, that one. In what ends up kind of being quite befitting of the tournament as a whole. If you kind of go later on, obviously it's an okay result against Norway. I mean, obviously one would have been far better, but it's not totally calamitous there at that point, and we don't need to talk about the final game in the group. That is a whole different start of heartache, and 20 years later we did a whole podcast about all the heart that came from that one. But it's again quite hard done by. It's one of those pretty good Scotland performances overall. I think you make a good point when you say it's more of a cohesive unit rather than any particular standout players. You've got good players, your John Collins and Paul Lambert, for example. Colin Hendry, obviously, done very well in a Scotland shirt over the years, but you've not got a Kenny Dalglish, a Dennis Law, Scott McTominay. So it's one of those that is very different, very cohesive, and quite unfortunate to lose like that, I think.
Yeah, Stephen, what do you make of this one? It was, as tournament openers go, this didn't put things beyond hope. I mean, Lewis has talked of what went wrong after it, but really this was a free hit. You go into the opening game, eyes of the world on you, against the reigning champions, the favourites, and to actually play this well, even though it went slightly wrong towards the end, there was nothing really that Scotland should be fearing for the rest of the group from this point on. It was a good performance.
It was, to play so well in your toughest game, it did leave you feeling that Scotland can do something here against a good Norway side. Don't get me wrong, and Morocco. We did feel that Scotland, could get a win out of. So we mentioned it on the previous part of this, how Scotland kind of do it all back to front in this one. They do the heroic bit first and then do the kind of like the misadventure. Whereas so many World Cups was misadventure first and then heroic exit towards the end of it. So I think with this one, Scotland were hardworking, massively organised, pragmatic, Craig Brown doing Craig Brown things, put together a very good collective. Increasingly limited in terms of squads gone by, but still, some very good players in there that can do a job. And Brazil kind of eased themselves into the tournament somewhat with this one. There were times in the game where they really dominated it, and then there were, they kind of looked like they could run away and then didn't. They just kind of like dropped down a gear or two, and but within that, Scotland, to get that equaliser, I think that's where Brazil kind of panicked, because I think at 1-0 there was a bit of, we can run away with this whenever we want. But once the equaliser went in, it was kind of, hang on a minute. And like say the manner of the goal that Brazil win. And what tends to go forgotten as well is that Scotland had a really decent shout for a second penalty in injury time in this one, and the ball hit Dunga's hand. Could easily have been given as a penalty. But I think the fact that it was the opening game, Scotland had already had one penalty. Whether FIFA would I don't know, kind of like risk the wrath of Nike by giving Scotland a second penalty or not in this game would be an interesting module in itself.
Well, indeed. So, there is one more Brazil-Scotland game to come, 2026, at least for now. We've almost reached a point. So we've had 4 matches, 3 defeats, 1 draw, and 2 goals scored for Scotland versus 7 against in Brazil's favour. Most of those coming in that iconic 1982 game, of course. And apart from that one fixture, which... as you both said, no sort of qualms about the excellence of the team Scotland were up against there. Apart from that one, it's all been very, very close. It's been tight. It's been edgy, and Scotland unfortunate not to have.
And even 82, half of that game runs away from them. The other half, they do go toe to toe.
Yeah. So there you have it, Lewis. Nothing to fear.
We'll see what we're saying in a month's time or so when the World Cup takes place.
Is it even a real Scottish World Cup, Lewis, if you're not facing Brazil?
No, it isn't. And is it a real World Cup if Scotland aren't valiant in defeat here and mess it up against Haiti? That's the real question.
Don't forget, this is going to be Ancelotti's Brazil as well. So there may well be a little bit of pragmatism at play by the time that they're going into that final group game. Also, this is a Brazil that I think they've got clearly some kind of complex about the World Cup now. They're going to go into a World Cup where they've not won it since 2002 by Brazilian standards. That's quite an alarming thing. And since then, there's been things like that semi-final capitulation, to Germany on home soil, that will haunt them as much as the Uruguay 1950 will. So this is a different Brazil. It's a different Scotland. It's a different Brazil. You look at, say, 74, they're playing the holders, the World Cup holders. 82, the purveyors of beautiful football under Telly Santana. 1990. Still a Brazil of substance that are going to be trying to be grown up. 1998 up against the holders again. So on each occasion, Scotland are playing a Brazil of immense substance or expectation, whereas now it's kind of here is a Brazil that haven't won the World Cup for 24 years. Here's a Brazil that no Argentina won the last World Cup. There's a lot of questions, resting over Brazil, and it's going to be fascinating. But the thing is that Scotland might already be through by the time they play them.
We can only dream.
You can only dream. Lewis, Scotland have played Brazil 10 times in their history. Do you want to hazard a guess at how many times Scotland have won?
Well, we didn't win at the World Cup. We didn't win the last time we played them. It was a friendly a few years ago. I think Neymar scored twice. I think that's the last time we played them. I'm going to guess that beyond that, so that's 5 games we haven't won. So I'm confident in saying we've won once, yeah.
Sorry, Lewis. No, you haven't even done that.
Wow. Well, at least I didn't predict in the other podcast that we'd beat them. So at least there's that.
You are right. The last game was a 2-0 loss. It was 2011, that one, actually. That's quite some time ago now. But you were quite right. Neymar got both the goals on that occasion. No, there have been 8 defeats and 2 draws, one of which was that 1974 goalless draw. The other was actually the very first occasion that Scotland played Brazil. Just as a little aside before we finish, this was 1966. It was a warm-up for Brazil for the England World Cup. Stevie Chalmers scored after 38 seconds in that game. So if Scotland-Brazil history had stopped at that point, everything was absolutely magnificent and rosy, and what could possibly go wrong? However, Brazil equalised 4 minutes later. It did end 1-1. So there you go. That's the other one that was not a defeat. 75,000 at Hampden Park for that one.
Wow. I think if we can manage to draw 1-1, I think that would hopefully be enough in the group by that point, and that would be lovely if we can do that. That's putting a lot on the Morocco game, but even still.
It says here that Brazil were staying in Ayrshire Marine Hotel in Troon. They trained at Troon FC in Kilmarnock's Rugby Park. I think they'll be preparing for Scotland this time in rather more glamorous surroundings. But we shall see if Scotland can buck the trend and get one over Brazil at a World Cup. You never know, Lewis. You never know. keep the faith. But thank you very much for joining me once again for this little step back in time for Scotland. Thank you very much, Lewis.
Thank you very much. It's been very fun to reminisce about these games. There's some really good ones in there. And however, I do hope we just don't have a vintage 1982 Brazil rock up to Miami when we play them in the last game. That would be grand, because I don't know if we've quite got the defence to be handling anything like that. But if we can get one of the more sort of pragmatic, which I think Stephen's right, the fact we've got Carlo Ancelotti might be a little bit more pragmatic. We'll wait and see. I'm trying to hype myself up for the fact we'll get a result against Brazil this time at the end of the podcast. But it's been great fun, some great games to look back on, and thank you very much for having me on.
Spot on, and cheers, Stephen. I think this one may be more 1990 than 1982. I think coming up.
Yeah, that's the way I'm seeing it. Yeah, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, though.
Absolutely. We shall see. That is all to come. For the meantime, thank you very much, everyone, for listening. This is Your Boys Took a Hell of a Beating, the World Cup Little Brother. You have to say that's magnificent. I'll get it right eventually. And do give us a like, subscribe, follow, all of that stuff. And join us again next time for whatever topic we delve into next. Thank you very much, and goodbye.